He built his fame on my voice, my lyrics, my pain. And when the world applauded, he stood in the spotlight, with someone else by his side. I disappeared. Let them forget me. But I never stopped writing. And now my song is everywhere. Because this time I'm not giving my name away. This time I sing it loud. I stood at the back of the ballroom, a forgotten silhouette beneath a crystal chandelier. The air was saturated with perfume and applause. Cameras clicked in rapid fire, capturing the woman at the center of the stage like she was the sun reincarnated in sequins. Vivienne Cade, every inch the perfect storm. Her lips parted in a faux surprised smile as the final chord of her performance faded into theatrical silence. The song was mine. I knew it from the way she lingered on the second verse. Exactly the way I had written it years ago, with a hesitation built into the melody. It was intentional. A pause for grief, for breath, for heartbreak. A breath she had no right to take. Every love story has a sound, Vivienne said into the mic, her voice breathy and confident. This one is for Damon Hale. Spotlight swung to the man seated front row. His smile was slow, deliberate, that rehearsed kind of charm that works well in magazines and makes your skin crawl in person. My husband, or technically the man I was still married to. People laughed, clapped harder. A few even stood for an ovation. No one noticed the woman in the back wearing a black cocktail dress and thrifted heels, gripping her clutch so tightly the bones in her hand ached. No one saw me. That had always been Damon's talent, making me invisible without ever asking me to hide. I turned before the next act started, slipping out through the side doors and into the corridor where the carpet muffled the sound of my steps. It had started to rain. The soft, steady kind, the kind that doesn't threaten, just lingers. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't want one. The car arrived, late as always. When I got in, the driver adjusted the mirror. "Long night, ma'am." I didn't answer. I just watched the lights of the city smear across the window, all blurred gold and deep violet. Somewhere behind us, Damon was probably sipping champagne with Vivienne draped over his shoulder like a medal. At the red light, I took off the chain around my neck. A gift from Damon on our 5th anniversary, the one he forgot until the day after. He said it reminded him of a treble clef. It was shaped like a noose. I dropped it into my bag without a word. The house was silent. Not the peaceful kind, the hollow kind. The kind that makes you feel like a ghost in your own life. I stepped inside, heels clicking once before I slipped them off at the door out of habit. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I had walked these rooms in the dark enough times to navigate by memory. The furniture was arranged with clinical perfection. The minimalist art on the walls still confused me. Expensive, yes, but soulless. I passed by the grand piano. The keys were dusted, polished, untouched. For show. Just like everything else. My fingers hovered over the lid. I used to write here. Music, dreams, all the things I never said aloud. Now I couldn't even bring myself to open it. Upstairs, our bedroom, his bedroom, smelled faintly of cologne and fabric softener. I stood by the window and looked out into the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Vivienne was raising a toast. Maybe to Damon. Maybe to herself. It didn't matter. The side table drawer creaked as I opened it. The wedding ring was still there. I hadn't worn it in weeks. Damon hadn't asked why. He knew better than to start a conversation he wasn't ready to finish. I didn't take the ring. I didn't need a symbol of something so broken. Instead, I walked down the hallway to the guest room, the one I had quietly claimed over the past year. That's where my books lived. My piano scores. Myself. I knelt in front of the old dresser and pulled the lowest drawer all the way out. Behind it, taped to the baseboard, was a thin metal box. I peeled it loose with shaking fingers. My palms were already sweaty. I hadn't touched this box since the day I wrote the final version of Hollow Veins, the song Damon had handed to Vivienne without so much as a thank you. Inside were my compositions. Original. Handwritten. Untouched by producers or ghostwriters. 17 pieces, each with a name, a memory, a part of me. No titles had ever made it into the public. They'd been rebranded under Damon's label, credited to whoever was easiest to market. One even won an award. I wasn't invited to the ceremony. Damon brought Vivienne instead. I pulled out the top sheet. It was smudged at the corners, creased from rewrites. The silence that sang. The first one I'd written after giving up my teaching job to help Damon start his label. I was supposed to be the support beam behind his empire. Funny. Beams aren't usually told to disappear once the house is finished. I stared at the page until the notes blurred, not from sadness, from clarity. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor back against the dresser, sheet music spread around me like a broken halo. I didn't play. I didn't write. I just remembered. The first song I ever performed. A recital in college, my fingers stiff with nerves. The small studio I rented when I first moved to the city, where cockroaches played hide and seek under the piano stand. The night Damon cried in my lap because he thought his dream was dying. The morning after when I gave him 4 songs, wrapped in silence and trust. And the moment he kissed my forehead and said, "You're everything." He just forgot to add, "until you're not useful anymore." I gathered my scores, stacked them gently and slid them back into the box. Not out of fear. Out of decision. Because someday, maybe soon, maybe not, they wouldn't stay in this drawer anymore. But tonight I needed silence. Real silence. Not the kind Vivienne performed. Not the kind Damon smiled through. The kind that comes before a storm. When you give up something willingly, it doesn't hurt all at once. It creeps in slowly. First you tell yourself it's just temporary. A pause, not a sacrifice. Then you get used to not hearing your name. Then you forget to introduce yourself with it. One day someone compliments your work and before you can say, "Thank you, I wrote that," you just smile and nod because it feels easier that way. I used to be Alara Quinn, music teacher, composer, and once upon a time, the girl who turned down a conservatory scholarship because her mother needed a surgery no one else in the family would pay for. Back then I believed in romantic struggle. That hardship refined you. That being overlooked meant your brilliance was simply too big to be seen up close. Then I met Damon Hale. He had charisma like gasoline. A single spark and people would ignite for him. I was 24, teaching piano out of a rented studio behind a laundromat. He was 30, freshly fired from his second assistant role at a mid-tier record label. Broke, bitter, brilliant. I didn't fall in love with him. I dove. "Play that again," he'd said the night we met, right after a student of mine left their lesson early. He had been waiting outside to meet a friend who never showed. I played the piece again. My own composition. Something light, hopeful. Something I'd written on a morning when I still believed I could afford to dream. He stayed for 2 hours. Not saying much. Just listening. And when I finished he offered me a ride home in the rain even though he walked there. We were married in under a year. "Let me build this," Damon said one night, both our feet tucked beneath the same blanket on the couch. "Let me build this label. And when it's big enough I'll give you the stage you deserve." He didn't have much then. A laptop, a rented room, a borrowed microphone setup. What he had was hunger, and I mistook it for ambition. I composed a sample song to help him pitch to a client. Just one. He used it in a meeting and landed a small partnership. It was my name on the file, but he sent it from his account. "That's just how the business works," he said. "They want simplicity. You can't credit a nobody." I believed him. So I wrote another. Then another. Soon Damon was using our music to network brand market. But the hour faded fast. I became the invisible half of every success. The first artist he signed was a soft-spoken R&B singer named Al Duet. She sang like a summer storm, quiet but impossible to ignore. When Damon couldn't afford to hire a proper composer, I gave him 3 tracks to help build her debut EP. They charted. Minor charts, indie circuit stuff. But enough to catch attention. Still, Elle didn't even know I existed. When we bumped into each other at a launch event, she smiled politely and asked if I worked in wardrobe. That night, I cried in the bathtub while Damon knocked on the door holding champagne. "You did this," he said proudly. "You're my secret weapon." I told myself that was enough. But secrets rot when they don't see daylight. By year 3, we'd landed a mid-level distribution deal. Damon started dressing differently, fitted blazers, custom shoes. He walked with the kind of confidence people mistake for kindness. I started saying less. One night I told him I wanted to start writing under my own name. Just one project. Just one credit. He didn't get angry. That would have been easier. He got quiet. Thoughtful. Told, "Oh, you don't want to deal with this industry. It's brutal. They'll tear you apart." "I can handle it." "No, I mean, they won't respect you." "Why?" He hesitated. "Then, you're not marketable. You're too subtle. We've worked hard to build this brand. Let's not muddy the image now." That was the first time I felt small in the room with him. That was also the first time I kept writing anyway, in secret. By the time Vivienne arrived, Damon's company was in financial trouble. He never admitted it out loud, but I could see it in his late nights, the frantic meetings, the missed payments. One day, I found an overdue utilities notice buried under a pile of unopened mail. That same night, he came home and told me Vivienne Cade was considering signing. "She's the real deal," he said. "If I land her, everything changes." I asked what she wanted. "She's picky. She wants a distinct sound. Something soft but cinematic. Something she can claim as her own." I said nothing for a long moment. Then I got up, walked to the piano and played a song I had written 6 months ago but never shown anyone. The room fell silent. When I finished, Damon just stared at me like I had pulled a diamond out of my throat. "Elara," he whispered. "This is it." "I want credit," I said quietly. A long silence. Then he reached for my hand, kissed it and said, "You'll get something even better." He never said what that was. Now I know it was nothing. Vivienne's career exploded in under 8 months. 3 songs. 2 national ad campaigns. 1 Vogue cover. All tracks Ghost composed. All mine. The label was saved. Damon became a regular on industry panels. They started calling him a visionary. Vivienne, on the other hand, developed a taste for claiming genius. She once said in an interview, "My producer and I have this psychic connection. I describe what I feel and he just brings it to life." I was the psychic connection. I just wasn't allowed to speak. Even now, back in my tiny apartment above the music store, I still have the first contract Damon drew up for me to sign. It's tucked inside a manila envelope under my bed. The name on it is not mine. Composer, Ghost Note Media LC. That was me. That was the name Damon used to legally separate me from my own work. He said it was for protection. If anything goes wrong, you won't be liable. The only thing that went wrong was thinking he meant well. I don't know what woke me at 3:27 a.m. Maybe it was the rain. I sat up in bed and stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, fingers itching. The melody for The Hollow Wife was in my head again. Clear, vivid, demanding. I hadn't played it in months. It was too personal. I had written it the day after Vivienne's first magazine feature. The one where she said her inspiration comes from learning to overcome pain. She didn't know pain. She only knew how to monetize it. I got out of bed, pulled my sweatshirt tighter and sat at the piano in the corner of the apartment. The keys were uneven, a few chipped from age. But they answered me anyway. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need them. For the next hour I played what had been buried for too long. The ghost notes. The discarded scraps. The melody he rejected. The one I never dared to share. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. By dawn my throat was sore from humming. My hands ached. But my mind was clear for the first time in years. I stared at the faded manuscript on the desk. The Hollow Wife. Not just a song. A declaration. And maybe, just maybe, the start of a reckoning. I didn't take much with me. A suitcase. A duffel of manuscripts. My old keyboard, balanced awkwardly on the backseat of a rideshare car that smelled like cinnamon gum and damp jackets. It was nearly midnight when we pulled up to the narrow building on 7th. The one with peeling green paint and a flickering neon sign that still read Luthier's Lessons. The upstairs apartment had been empty for a while. The landlord, Wes, remembered me. He still wore the same thick glasses and talked like every sentence was part of a conspiracy. "You sure you want to come back here?" he asked, dangling the keys in one hand while scratching his chin with the other. I nodded. "It's temporary." He snorted. "That's what you said the first time. Then you taught here 3 years. I smiled faintly. He had a point. The stairs groaned like they remembered me. I used to run up and down them 10 times a day, balancing sheet music in one hand and takeaway coffee in the other. The teaching studio was still downstairs, small, wood-paneled, with posters of Bach and Debussy curling at the corners. And now I was back, older, heavier with silence. The apartment wasn't glamorous. A studio with uneven floorboards, a yellowing kitchen and windows that let in more noise than light. But the walls were mine. The air didn't carry his cologne. And that was enough. I dropped my bags and sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by boxes of music I hadn't dared to open for years. The quiet was so complete it rang. 2 days passed before anyone realized where I'd gone. Damon didn't call. Of course he didn't. He wasn't worried. He never was, not unless something threatened his reputation. My absence wouldn't crack his mirror. At most he'd assume I needed space. That word he used like a leash. On the third day someone knocked. I ignored it. Knocked again. 3 times. Then silence. Then a voice. If you don't open this door, I swear I will start singing. Loud. Off key. And you know I can't hit a note to save my life. I blinked. Oh. I opened the door. Rafi. Rafi Morgan stood in the hallway holding a half-empty cup of iced coffee, wearing an oversized coat that made him look like he'd borrowed it from someone richer, and the same crooked grin that hadn't changed in a decade. Alara Quinn, he said, stepping inside without asking. Still writing ghost symphonies in the dark? I crossed my arms. How did you find me? Your landlady posted your name on the mailbox. Not exactly discreet. You didn't answer your texts. So I called Wes. He still hates me, by the way. He hates everyone. True, he said cheerfully, flopping onto the edge of my old piano bench. Got this place. You gave me my first vocal warm-up lesson right here. You remember? You couldn't hit middle C. And you threatened to throw sheet music at my head. Romantic in hindsight. I laughed despite myself. Why are you here? He didn't answer right away. Just looked around the apartment like it held something sacred. I heard the hollow wife. His voice softened. It's you, isn't it? My throat went dry. I didn't answer. You submitted it anonymously, he said. Under EQ. But I'd know your phrasing anywhere. The way you bend time signatures like you're twisting silk. I swallowed. I didn't think it would go anywhere. I just needed to let something out. Well, he said, reaching into his coat pocket and tossing a folded printout onto the floor in front of me. It went. The flyer was from an indie label, Halcyon South, one of those fiercely curated platforms where passionate nobodies dropped raw music and sometimes found cult followings. My track was number 3 on their trending list. It had hit 100K plays overnight. No press push. No promo. Just uploads. That's the raw numbers talking, Rafi said, pointing to the stats. People felt this. I'm not ready, I said quietly. Ready for what? To be her again. To step into a room and be expected to shine. I've been erased for so long, I don't know how to stand upright without disappearing halfway through. Rafi's face sobered. You were never the problem, El. He just trained you to believe that being invisible was elegant. That struck something in me, deep and cold. I don't want revenge, I murmured. He nodded. Good. Then let's talk rebirth. That night I sent a single email to Halcyon South. No name. No backstory. Just, I'm the one behind the hollow wife. I have more. Let me know if you're interested. EQ. It wasn't a declaration. It was a knock on a door I'd closed on myself. I didn't expect a reply. It came in under 5 minutes. Meanwhile, somewhere across the city, someone else had heard the track too. He played the opening bars again, brow furrowed. Kai Bennett. Indie folk singer. Critically adored, commercially overlooked. He dropped off the grid for almost a year after a contract dispute with a major label. Rumors said he was writing his next album himself. No producers, no ghostwriters. But when he heard The Hollow Wife, something inside him cracked open. He knew that melody. Not the notes, the intent. The way it hovered and sank. It was unmistakable. He reached for his phone, scrolling past messages and tour contacts until he found the one name he hadn't deleted. Alara Quinn. Still saved. Still unopened since the night she ghosted the industry and vanished. He typed. Did you write this? Kai. He hovered. Then deleted it. If it was her, she'd reach out. If not, he didn't want to ruin the illusion. Back in my apartment, I opened the email from Halcyon South. They didn't ask for my name. Just said, whatever you're writing, keep writing. We'll publish whatever you send. Anonymous or not. Your voice deserves a home. I closed the laptop and let the silence settle around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like a prelude. If you stay quiet long enough, people will write your story for you. And if you hand them a pen, they'll ink you out of your own pages. I was in the middle of organizing chord sheets in my apartment when the headline hit my phone. Vivienne Cade and Damon Hale announce New Year's Eve concert. Soundtrack of a love story. I didn't have to open the article to know which songs they'd be using. The soundtrack was mine. Every crescendo, Every hush, every deliberate breath. The photo attached showed Vivienne sitting cross-legged in a pale gold blazer dress, all charm and shine. Damon sat beside her, hands folded like he was at church. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, it rarely did these days. Maybe guilt was finally giving him indigestion. I clicked the video embedded in the post and braced myself. The press conference was packed with journalists and influencers. Vivienne basked in the camera flashes like she'd invented light. "We're calling it a celebration of emotional truth," she said, laughing softly. "All the music reflects parts of my journey over the past few years. Every note is personal." I winced. Every note was mine. A reporter raised his hand. "Vivienne, you've had an evolving sound throughout your career. This new setlist feels unusually intimate. Did you write the new material yourself?" Vivienne tilted her head. "Of course. I don't work with ghostwriters. Everything I sing is born from lived experience." I paused the video. She didn't even flinch when she lied. Damon didn't correct her. He never did. Later that day, Rafi forwarded me the full set list for the concert. He'd gotten it from someone inside Hale Sound, a junior assistant who still followed me on social media, even if she didn't know I was EQ. 12 songs. 9 of them were mine. 3 were deeply personal. One I wrote after my miscarriage. A composition that had never been released publicly. I'd played it once for Damon in tears, barely able to hold the melody together. He'd hugged me and said he'd never use it. Now Vivienne was going to perform it under stage lights while wearing custom Chanel. Rafi called. "You saw it." "Yeah," I whispered. "I saw it." "You okay?" "No," I said. "But I'm not broken." There was a pause on the other end. "Then, you still have the originals, Elle. The timestamps, the drafts, the MIDI files." I looked at the hard drive on my desk. The one that had been gathering dust for years. "I do." "Then let's remind the world who you are." That night the internet broke again, but not because of Vivienne. Kai Bennett posted a 30-second clip to his fan page. Just him. A guitar. A rough vocal hum. And one line. "She wrote silence like it had teeth." No context. No caption. But fans noticed immediately. The melody was an echo of the Hollow Wife. Comment sections exploded with theories. Is this about EQ? Wait, is this a duet teaser? Please tell me Kai and EQ are working together. I watched it all from my bed, half wrapped in a blanket and disbelief. I hadn't spoken to Kai in years. Not since he opened for Elle Duet, and I was still pretending to be just Damon's wife. He'd always been intuitive. Too intuitive. Back then, I think he saw the cage I was in long before I admitted it was locked. Rafi texted within the hour. "Told you people were listening." And then another message. "You don't have to strike yet. But they just fired the first shot. When you're ready to fire back, we go big." I stared at the blinking cursor in our chat. Then typed. "Soon." I didn't know a melody could go viral. But the Hollow Wife had officially caught fire. Rafi sent me the numbers in real time. Streams climbing by the hour, indie charts lighting up like it was Christmas Eve. The track was everywhere. On playlists with names like Grief and Echoes and songs that split me open. For a song with no lyrics, no face and no name behind it, it had become a confession everyone seemed to understand. "I don't get it," I said, staring at the analytics chart. "Why now?" Rafi leaned back in his chair, eating cereal dry out of the box. "Because for the first time, you didn't write like you were asking permission." I didn't respond. But something about that hit deep. He gestured at the screen. "You've got music blogs dissecting your time signatures like ancient scripture. Twitter thinks you're a stage name for some European prodigy. And Spotify just added you to their Emerging Ghosts playlist, which is weirdly on brand. And Damon. Oh, he's sweating." He pulled up a screenshot from a private music industry group thread. It was a long post from one of Hale Sound's mid-tier PR consultants. "We're getting bombarded with questions about composer credits. Labels are asking for licensing clarification. Sponsorship partners are requesting documentation for every track Vivienne's performing live." Rafi smirked. "He's scrambling. They all are. You want to strike while the iron is not just hot, but fuming." I stared at the list of press inquiries. Some asking for interviews. Some offering NDAs. Others just wanting to know. Who is EQ? I closed the laptop. Not yet. I was still anonymous. For now. But that didn't stop him from finding me. It started with an Instagram story. Just a skyline. My skyline. The city scene from 7th and Grant. The view from the street below my apartment. Then a tag. A Kai Bennett music headphone, guess where I am. Subtle. Not so subtle. He didn't message me. Didn't call. Just loitered on the edge of the digital world, orbiting silently. Until he didn't. It was raining when I saw him again. I was coming out of the studio downstairs, not to teach, just to play. I'd found myself drifting down more often lately, humming fragments, recording pieces I didn't even know I was writing until they were already halfway done. The street was nearly empty. Damp pavement, a flickering light over the record store across the way. He was leaning against the wall like some movie cliché, hood down, hair longer, still disheveled in that way people tried to replicate but could never quite make charming. Kai, I said, surprised my voice didn't shake. Ilara. His smile was slow, almost sheepish. I didn't want to message. I figured if you wanted me to find you, you'd leave a trail. And if I didn't? He shrugged. Then I would have backed off. I looked at him for a long second. The quiet between us wasn't tense, just full. You heard it, I said. I knew it was you before the halfway mark. He moved closer just a step. You always had a sound like smoke through a keyhole. My throat caught. I didn't think you'd remember. I didn't forget. Another pause. He looked up toward the window above the music shop. That's you now. For the moment. And Damon. I smiled, the kind that didn't reach anywhere. Not anymore. We went to the tiny cafe down the street, the one that hadn't updated its menu since 2008. He ordered tea. I asked for coffee and barely drank it. We didn't talk about the past. Not yet. Instead he asked, why now? I looked at the cup between my hands. Because I finally realized the silence wasn't noble. It was survival. And I'm tired of surviving in lowercase. He was quiet. Then he reached into his coat pocket and slid a USB drive across the table. What's this? Something I started but couldn't finish. I didn't know what it needed until I heard the hollow wife. I stared at it. You want me to? I want you to write on it. With it. Against it. Whatever it turns into, it's yours as much as mine. I didn't take the drive right away. Just stared at it. Something about that small dumb piece of plastic made my chest feel heavy. You don't owe me this, I whispered. I'm not offering out of debt, he said softly. I'm offering because your voice made mine feel less lonely. I didn't know how to respond to that. So I didn't. By the next morning, music blogs had picked up the scent. Headlines. Mystery composer behind viral track possibly connected to Kai Bennett. EQ rumored to be linked to former Hale sound insider. Vivienne Cade's concert faces backlash over composer credit scandal. Vivienne, in true Vivienne fashion, took to her socials. A blurry black and white video of her in a studio, hair up, eyeliner smudged artfully. Some people are so desperate for relevance, they'll try to haunt your stage with ghost songs. Sad, really. The comments were mixed. Some called her brave. Others, more than I expected, called her out. Why not just say the composer's name if you have nothing to hide? I don't know, girl. This EQ track has more soul than your last 3 albums combined. You used to sing like you were bleeding. Now it just feels like makeup. I scrolled for a moment, then powered my phone off. Later that evening, Rafi dropped by. No warning as usual. Okay, he said, kicking off his boots. We've got one shot to flip this narrative before the concert. I'm not ready to go public. I'm not saying you have to. But we need to let the right people know that the real story isn't hers to tell. He threw a folder on my desk. Industry showcase. 1 week. Halcyon South wants you to headline under EQ. I blinked. That's private invite only. No press. No labels. Just insiders. This is where real reputations are made. You can play live. Unseen. Or you can reveal. Your call. I stared at the folder. My name wasn't on it. Just EQ, headline slot confirmed. I spent that night at the piano. The USB drive from Kai sat on the music rack. I hadn't opened it yet. I would. When the silence inside me shifted. But for now I pressed my fingers into the keys and let the chords swell, low, steady and sharp. Not fragile. Not tentative. A voice like fire. There was no stage entrance. No dramatic curtain drop. No lights synced to drum beats. Just a girl in black jeans and a loose gray sweater, sitting behind a grand piano with her head bowed slightly. Her hands rested on the keys, motionless for a moment too long, long enough to make the air in the room hum with expectancy. That girl was me. But no one in the audience knew that yet. They knew the name EQ. They didn't know the face. The Halcyon South showcase was invite only, tucked into a rooftop performance space that felt more like a greenhouse than a venue. String lights overhead. No VIP tables. Just raw acoustic setups and folding chairs filled with real musicians, producers, label scouts. The kinds of people who know when they're hearing something real. Rafi stood by the sound booth, arms crossed, watching me with the ferocious stillness of a big brother in a crowded schoolyard. I hadn't spoken a word on stage in years. Now I was about to do it in front of half the industry. But not yet. First I let the music speak. I played Threadbare Lullaby. Then The Hollow Wife. And then something new, something unfinished spun from the piece Kai had handed me on that USB drive. I wove my melodies through his chords like they were meant to find each other. By the end of the third song, people were leaning forward in their seats. When I lifted my hands from the keys, there was silence. Not a sound. No clapping. No coughing. Just air vibrating with the kind of stillness that feels like an inhale before something shatters. And then, someone clapped. Then someone else. Then the room erupted. That was the moment she chose to enter. Vivienne Cade. Late. Uninvited. Dressed in a sequined red pantsuit like she'd walked off the set of an awards show. Her heels clicked like accusations as she made her way through the stunned audience. "Oh wow," she said loudly enough for the mic to pick it up. "So this is the ghost I've been hearing about." The applause died instantly. Heads turned. Whispers flared. Vivienne walked right up to the edge of the stage. "Well played," she said. Raw. Moody. A little self-indulgent, but I guess that's what anonymity gives you. No one to tell you when it's too much. She smiled, the kind that wanted a camera. I didn't stand. I didn't flinch. Instead I leaned into the mic and said calmly, "Funny. I was about to say the same thing about your entire career." A beat of silence. The audience collectively inhaled. Vivienne's smile faltered for a second. "I don't know what you're trying to prove, EQ," she said. "But we both know whose name is on the contract for those songs." Now I stood. Fully. Deliberately. I walked out from behind the piano. The lights followed me, brighter now, a spotlight warming the side of my face. I pulled a folded envelope from my back pocket and handed it to the MC. Dated copyright records. MIDI files. Sheet music drafts. All with timestamps going back 5 years. I looked back at Vivienne. "Every song you ever made famous. I wrote them." She opened her mouth. Then shut it. "I stayed anonymous because I believed the work would speak for itself," I continued. But then someone else spoke louder. "Rewrote my songs with their name." "No. I'm done being quiet." The room was dead still. Vivienne took a step back, bumping into a mic stand. She looked toward the side of the room at Damon. He stood half-shrouded in shadow, arms stiff at his sides, his expression unreadable. For once he had nothing rehearsed to say. Someone in the audience asked, "Wait, what's your real name?" I paused. Then finally I said it. Alara Quinn. Felt like stepping back into my own skin. After that, everything blurred. Reporters tried to rush the stage. Security pushed them back. Rafi appeared out of nowhere and guided me behind the curtain, hand on my shoulder, grounding me like he always did. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding. "You did it," he said, breathless. "You actually—" "She tried to hijack the stage," I murmured. "In a red suit, no less." Rafi burst out laughing. "You think that was bad? You should have seen Damon's face. Looked like someone just repossessed his soul." I smiled. But underneath it all, a different feeling burned. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I had stepped into the sound booth as a ghost. Now the industry would remember my name. The first cease and desist letter went out the next morning. 3 pages. Simple, direct, surgical. Damon, Hale and Hale Sound Entertainment were being formally notified that all performances of my music, past, present, and especially the upcoming concert, constituted intellectual property theft. Attached were certified timestamps, Manuscript scans, MIDI archives, and email threads from years ago. Evidence I never imagined I'd use. Evidence I once protected him with. Rafi said I could have gone scorched earth. I said I wanted surgical fire, hot enough to cut, precise enough to leave no ash of doubt. He grinned. You always did right like a scalpel. The story broke within hours. Composer Alara Quinn reveals ghostwritten hits at Halcyon Showcase. Damon Hale faces legal action from former wife and lead composer. Vivienne Kate accused of performing stolen work. Blames producer. Vivienne was the first to buckle. Her statement dropped before noon, a half-page press release, riddled with carefully chosen legal distance. I was not made aware of the full authorship history behind the material provided to me by Mr. Hale. I regret any pain caused and fully support any rightful recognition owed to Ms. Quinn. In other words, throw Damon under the bus and maybe the media won't cancel her couture campaign. She even followed me on social media. I didn't follow back. By afternoon, #AlaraQuinn was trending globally. And Damon? Silent. Until he wasn't. He posted an Instagram story. Low lighting, face turned away, jazz playing in the background. Regret doesn't rewrite history. I just wish I'd told the truth sooner. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just regret, dressed in vintage filters and faux introspection. That evening Kai showed up again. No fanfare. No dramatics. He knocked on my apartment door holding Thai food and a beat-up laptop. You look tired, he said, stepping inside like he always belonged here. I am, I replied, collapsing onto the couch. It's like watching my past go through a wood chipper in slow motion. Kai set down the food and opened his laptop. I figured you might want to see this. On the screen was a mock-up of a small independent labels page. Not Halcyon South. Not part of any conglomerate. Just a clean logo. A white quill over black sound waves. I frowned. What is this? I started it, he said. Months ago. After I left my last label. I wanted to create something different. Somewhere real musicians could own their work. And it's yours if you want it, he said. My heart skipped. What do you mean yours? I mean co-founder. Creative director. Composer in residence. Whatever title you want. You can rebuild every song they stole. Own it this time. From the master files to the streaming cut. And I'll back you. He looked at me not like someone who pitied me. Like someone who believed in me. The silence that followed was soft. Dense with feeling. And something more dangerous. Hope. The following day, Hale Sounds Board announced an internal audit. The moment the press released screenshots of old email drafts where Damon had forwarded my compositions with comments like, let's say this came from the team, the damage was irreversible. A major brand pulled its sponsorship from the New Year's concert. Then another. Within 72 hours, the concert was postponed indefinitely. Vivienne released a shaky Instagram live, tearfully saying she'd been manipulated, and that she'd never knowingly disrespected another artist. I watched from my bed with a cup of tea and a warm sense of detachment. I don't feel sorry for her, I said to Rafi, who was busy sending licensing forms from my kitchen counter. Good. Because she wouldn't have felt sorry for you. By the weekend, I had 10 separate offers from publishing companies, 2 podcasts begging for interviews, and a handwritten note from a composer I'd idolized in college. Your music speaks like pages turned under candlelight. Thank you for letting us finally hear you. I cried reading that one. Not because I was sad. Because it was the first time I felt seen as something more than a secret weapon. I met Kai at the rooftop studio the next night. We played for hours. Fragments, harmonies, laughter between bars. He sang something half-finished and I added a piano line that made us both sit up. This, he whispered. This is how music's supposed to feel. And I realized he wasn't just talking about the melody. The following morning, I filed official documentation reclaiming every unreleased composition I'd ever ghostwritten for Hale Sound. Damon didn't contest it. He couldn't. Because in one final twist of fate, I had found the contract he'd hidden. Buried in a forgotten Google Drive folder, attached to an email he'd sent himself under a different account. An early agreement naming me as primary source composer, meant only as internal proof to leverage against others. He'd kept it in case he ever needed to prove the music wasn't stolen, just buried. But he never expected me to find it. I printed it, signed it, and sent a scanned copy to his lawyer. The subject line read, "Unburied." He asked to meet me in a quiet cafe 3 blocks from the courthouse. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. He was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and dark circles etched under his eyes. The same expensive coat. The same casual arrogance, only now, fraying. I stood there for a second before walking over. "Still ordering for me," I said as I sat down. His eyes lifted slowly. "You used to like hazelnut. I used to like you too." He didn't flinch. He just leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You've made your point, Alara." "I haven't even started." A long pause. The sound of steam hissing from the espresso machine behind us. "I know I messed up," he said quietly. "That's generous." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, we can handle this quietly. I'll sign over the rights, give you credit on everything retroactively, and—" "No." His brows pinched. "You haven't even heard the full offer." "I don't want your offer," I said. "I want ownership. Not permission. You already have it." "Then why are we here?" Damon leaned forward, voice lower now, sharp. "Because you're not doing this for justice. You're doing this because of him." "Kai." "Yeah. Him. You think I haven't seen the videos? The little studio clips, the joint rehearsals? You wanted him back and this was your way in." I laughed once, sharp enough to draw a glance from the table beside us. "Damon, you think I built an entire war campaign just to impress a man?" He blinked. "I didn't want Kai back," I said. "I wanted me back." He was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out a thin envelope and slid it across the table. "Final proposal," he said. "A buyout. You walk away clean. You take credit, the catalog, even royalties. I'll step down as producer on every track. In exchange, you drop the lawsuit. No press. No countersuit. Just quiet." I stared at the envelope. "This is your idea of dignity? This is my idea of peace." I looked up, slow and deliberate. Peace would have been giving me credit when I asked for it. Not waiting until I burned the whole lie down just to be heard. His jaw clenched. "You made this public," he muttered. "You embarrassed me. I exposed you. There's a difference." His voice rose, desperate now. "We were building something together, Al. You were the heart. And you buried the heart so you could take its pulse and wear it like a crown." Silence. Across the room, someone angled their phone up, not obviously but enough to know. Our conversation wasn't as private as he hoped. Good. Let them hear the truth. Raw. Unfiltered. On the record. "I gave you everything," I said quietly. "My music. My name. My trust. You looked me in the eye and called me your partner. Then turned around and scrubbed me from the credits like I was an afterthought." Damon looked away. I stood up. "Don't worry," I said. "This won't get any uglier. Not because I'm protecting you, but because I'm done looking back." He opened his mouth but I raised a hand. "I'm not angry anymore, Damon. I'm free. And that scares you more than any lawsuit ever could." I picked up my coat, left the coffee untouched, and walked out, head high, steps steady, into the afternoon sunlight where the world was already moving on. The first time I saw my name at the top of a headline, I nearly cried. Not because it was new, because it was mine. Alara Quinn releases The Hollow Wife, an anthem of elegance and defiance. No ghost composer. No anonymous initials. No footnotes. Just me. The album dropped at midnight. 12 tracks. Every one reclaimed. Rewritten. Reproduced under my full creative direction. Some I had composed during my marriage. Some after. A few I never intended to share. Just rough piano demos, background hums, voice memos I'd once whispered into the dark, half afraid of being heard. Now they were fully orchestrated. Alive. Kai helped on 2 tracks. Background harmonies, light acoustic touches. He never asked to be featured. Never pushed. When I offered him co-credit, he just shook his head. "This is your rebirth," he said. "I'm just glad I got to hold the camera." It hit 1 million streams in the first 24 hours. By the end of the week, 3 million. Critics didn't just praise it. They felt it. They wrote about it like it was an experience. A collection that doesn't shout its power, but breathes it into every note. Quinn's melodies don't ask for your attention. They claim it without apology. There was no revenge in the music. No direct call-out. Not once did I name Damon or Vivienne. But they were everywhere between the lines. Not as enemies, as shadows I finally stepped beyond. The awards season approached fast. I received 3 nominations. Best Independent Composer. Best Concept Album. Breakout Artist of the Year. That one made me laugh. Breakout, as if I hadn't been writing behind the curtain for 10 years. I was invited to perform at the gala. Rafi called me the night before. Big stage. Big crowd. Lots of cameras. You ready? No, I said honestly. But I'm going anyway. The night of the awards I wore a slate blue velvet gown. Soft. Elegant. No shimmer. No statement necklace. Just quiet strength. Kai met me outside the venue. A tailored black suit, no tie. He offered his arm like we were stepping into war. Do I look ridiculous? I whispered. You look like the truth, he said. And the truth doesn't need validation. Inside, the air buzzed with chatter and champagne. When I stepped onto the red carpet, the cameras flared so fast it felt like lightning. For once, I didn't look down. I looked at them. Damon was already seated by the time I took my place near the stage. Second row. Alone. When our eyes met, he didn't look smug or furious. He looked hollow. The applause wasn't for him anymore. The host introduced my performance as A Composer's Return to Her Name. I walked to the piano, adjusted the mic, and looked out over the crowd. And then I said, for years I thought silence was strength. That invisibility made me noble. But now I know that naming yourself isn't vanity. It's survival. This piece is for every version of me who stayed quiet to protect someone else's comfort. And for every version of you who's done the same. I played Rewritten. A new composition, born from nothing but healing. There was no weeping. No theatrics. Just music. Steady. Certain. Afterward I returned to my seat. Kai was waiting, hand resting lightly on the armrest between us. Close but not claiming. I meant it, I whispered. This time I didn't play to prove anything. He nodded. I know. When they announced the Best Concept Album winner, I didn't expect to hear my name. But when they did, I stood. I took the stage. Held the award. And said, thank you for listening to the voice I almost buried. No tears. No drama. Just the sound of the room rising to its feet. Not because I demanded it, but because I finally knew I didn't need to. Some endings don't come with a bang. They slip in quietly like a final note that fades into silence. Not because it's weak, but because it has nothing left to prove. The morning after the awards, I woke to the sun warming my apartment floor. The trophy stood on the windowsill, catching bits of light. I didn't touch it. Instead, I brewed coffee, played a few chords on the old upright, and opened the curtains wide. For the first time in years, there was no pressure. No expectation. No deadline carved out by someone else's timeline. Just space. And breath. There were still a few final ripples in the media. Questions about why I hadn't attended the afterparty. Speculation on Damon's empty reaction shot during my acceptance speech. But none of that mattered now. I'd said what I needed to say. With music. Not with gossip. A week later, a letter arrived in a cream-colored envelope. No return address. But the handwriting was familiar. I didn't even have to open it to know it was from Damon. So I read it. Lara, you were always the better composer. And the better person. What I did, what I took, it wasn't just your work. It was your light. And I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for that. You don't have to respond. I just needed to finally say it. I'm stepping down from my firm. Vivienne and I are no longer together. I'm trying to start again. Quietly. Thank you for reminding the world who you are. Even if I was too blind to see it when it mattered. There was no plea. No manipulative ending. Just remorse. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into the back of my drawer. Not out of sentiment. Out of closure. That evening, Kai arrived with takeout and a shy smile. I didn't bring flowers, he said. But I brought your favorite dumplings and those absurd matcha cookies you pretend you hate. I laughed. You know me too well. Not yet, he said, setting the bag down. But I'd like to. We didn't label anything. There were no confessions, no grand proclamations. We just sat side by side on my rug, eating dumplings and listening to old vinyls. At some point, I fell asleep with my head on his shoulder. When I woke, he was still there, sketching something on a notepad. You working? I murmured. He turned it around. A rough logo. Quinn Studios. I raised a brow. We're starting a business now? You already have one, he said. Might as well give it a door plate. I stared at the sketch. Only if we keep it small. No suits. No hierarchy. Just space for artists who've been told to shrink themselves. Deal, he said. Months passed. The Hollow Wife remained on the charts longer than anyone predicted. Not because it was trendy, but because it was true. I began mentoring new composers, mostly women, who had hidden behind male producers for years. We held open mic nights in the tiny studio downstairs. Sometimes Kai sang. Sometimes I did. Never the old songs. Only new ones. One night as we were locking up, Kai looked at me and asked, "Do you regret it?" Regret what? Walking away from the empire. The spotlight. The power you could have claimed. I paused. Then smiled. No. Because I didn't walk away from it. I built something better. The next morning I sat down at my piano with no deadline, no commission, no ghost client. And for the first time in a decade I wrote something just for me. Not for performance. Not for playback. A song no one else would ever hear. The song I never got to sing. Because I didn't need to anymore. I had already lived it. The end.